episode 287 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 17th of June 2024. I'm Joe, and with me are Félim.
Evening.
Graham.
Hello.
And Will.
Hello.
Let's get straight on with our discoveries then. Will, what is Nvidia patch?
Well, full disclosure, I haven't tried this, but I'm basing it on the GitHub description, which is good enough, I would think. The patch here removes the restriction that Nvidia put on the maximum number of simultaneous video encoding sessions on the consumer-grade graphics cards. So there's a whole list of graphics cards in there that it supports. But, you know, the ones that you or I may buy to play a few games on come with this hardware restriction that prevent you from using the full capacity of this video card so that they can sell you like a professional level version. And this patch removes that restriction. Lols.
Oh, who's a naughty boy?
Right. So this is patching the proprietary driver to take full advantage of your hardware. That sounds excellent.
Yeah, so you have to download the driver. And again, on the GitHub page, there's a list of the drivers that are supported. Download the driver, use this tool to patch that driver, then install it. And so if you're using the distro provided one, you'll have to remove that first, and then you'll have to deal with upgrades and so on and so on. But yeah, at that point, then you are free to use as many video encoding threads as you want.
And you can probably cook bacon on your GPU while you're doing it.
Certainly can.
All right, and Spotify car thing. So I know a little bit about this. Spotify had this sort of screen thing that you could connect to your phone and have a dedicated Spotify car playing device thing. And they sold it for about a year and then just pulled the plug on it, said they weren't going to support it, said they weren't going to refund anyone. Then after a massive backlash, agreed to refund people. But by that point, people had already started hacking them.
Yeah, so the hardware is an Android device. It's got a USB plug on the back for power, in inverted commas, but of course you can plug that in and get like a fast boot option on it. And it's just essentially an Android phone running only the Spotify app. And there are quite a lot of tools out there which allow you to get root access, install your own applications, and ultimately change the underlying OS to something else. There are a lot of tools out there. I haven't got one of these CarPlay devices, so I haven't looked into it in a great deal. But this video that I'm linking to in the show notes takes you through step by step using one of these tools to just get root and replace some of the apps and unlock the device to its full capacity. So if you have one of these and you haven't chucked it away, as Spotify suggests you do, then there might be life in the old dog yet.
Spotify suggested that you recycle it responsibly, I think, rather than chuck it away. But nevertheless, they completely abandoned it. This is so good to see people actually getting some life out of these things.
Yeah, the hardware concept was, I mean, a little bit odd. Why would you have a second phone in your car that you linked to your first phone in your car to listen to Spotify? But it did have like some hardware buttons on it, so maybe it's a bit easier to use than trying to operate a touchscreen while you're driving. So I think the idea was there, and it's a decent enough piece of hardware based on the videos I've seen. I especially like the proper volume knob, like physical twisty-turny button. But obviously, it just didn't do enough to help their bottom line, so they canned it.
I would imagine a use case would be you don't want to have your phone screen on. If you're driving to work like you do every day and you don't need sat-nav, then you can save your phone's battery by using this thing instead, maybe. Maybe that was the thinking behind it, but it clearly didn't do very well. But I wonder if they'll start popping up on eBay. I haven't actually looked.
Maybe you can sellotape it to the front of your Dell non-existent computer that you keep getting for cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've had a quick look, and there are some. They're selling by now about $100, bidding starting at around $40-something. So they're not cheap.
I think you're better off with a shit old Android phone at that point. Unless you really want the hardware buttons, maybe. Probably just a bunch of dreamers thinking they can cash in. Félim, Borg Compact. Borg Compact?
I think it's Borg Compact, yes. So, if you don't read release notes, I mean, I didn't. And this happened a while ago. I obviously checked my backups. They did still work. I was able to restore stuff, no problem. But I was starting to get low on drive space. And, you know, I just assumed it was because I was storing way too much shite on it, which in fairness was fairly true. But what I didn't realize was that on the 22nd of February 2022, when Borg released version 1.2, they changed it that compaction of the backup storage didn't happen by default as part of the backup. It happened as a separate job. So people providing online services for Borg could do that as a separate off-peak sort of thing, because it could take many hours to run if you had a very large backup. And only recently did I look at my backups and go, I assume they're just very big and they're fine. And then I was looking through going, gosh, I should delete some of this. And I still couldn't see how I was going to save much space. And I thought maybe it's just because I store them on ZFS underneath, and maybe it's some sort of weirdness going on with the way Borg stores its data and the way copy on write works or whatever. And then I did a search for it after, like literally a span of 6 months it took me to get to this resolution, because I had enough space, not terribly bothered by checking whether this was an issue or not. And then I discovered that, yes, you have to run a compact now as part of it separately. And I went from 1.6 terabytes down to about 300 gigabytes. So, yeah. So if you haven't realized, and if you've used, there's example scripts for Borg, and I would have taken them ages ago, like really ages ago. If you haven't done that since, and since 1.2 existed, so early 2022, check, because you may not be compacting it and you may have a whole lot of space that you can recover. So there you go.
So this has been like 2.5 years nearly.
Yeah, well, as I said, like my backups, I was actually getting data from my backups. It wasn't a problem with anything. It was just that there was obviously some sort of compression or whatever, dedupe, I guess is what they were doing on it. And I just wasn't seeing any advantage of that. So look, a hard drive, if a hard drive isn't full, do you care? No. So my hard drive wasn't full. Eventually it got there and I went, well, that's so weird. But anyway, and I just assumed that it was all fine. And then I discovered this.
Graham, terminal text effects.
Yes, so this is probably a completely useless discovery, but I've really like screen eye candy. I have done for years. I can't get away from it. I still have wobbly windows for people who may see my screen grabs. And terminal text effects is basically the same thing, but for your terminal, for console text-based apps. It's both a library and a command line tool, and the effects that it contains are amazing. Think about like the kind of matrix transition, but then kind of quadruple it in your expectations. There's slides, there's path animations, there's fireworks, there's waterfalls, there's scrolling in all kinds of directions. And I'd love to have Tmux, for example, where I could do like a cube transition on the terminal, or when you split the screen, all of the characters bobble about. And the library lets you do that with your own Python scripts through the module, but also the command line tool lets you pipe stuff into it. And I don't know, I've got to find a way of making it useful, but I'm going to find a way.
What absolute folly is all I can say to this.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Do you know what? Back in the late 90s, I think it was one of Mike's very first articles that he had for, well, it must have been Linux format back then. And it was to get colorized graduated fonts in a terminal. And I swear to God, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have the right fonts. I didn't even know how they worked properly with the way the terminal, whatever. Like, I don't know what he was using. It wasn't the same one as that was in KDE. So I think it was probably something to do with that. But I could never get it to work. And I was always envious of his colorized fonts, which is kind of essentially what they do with the Powerline type stuff now, which is all just normal. So I wholeheartedly support this endeavor.
Oh, thanks, Félim. And the documentation's really good, I have to say.
Yeah, well, Mike's wasn't. So just got to put that out there. Tell him. Because I couldn't get it to fucking work.
Mike was probably only about 17 at the time.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, wow. I'm looking at the effects showroom, and it's not what I was expecting. I was expecting like lolcat type stuff, but it's way beyond that.
It's worse.
Oh, hang on. Here's one. Color shift. That looks a bit like lolcat. Okay.
Is it not 9cat?
No. Like, are you not familiar with lolcat? Is this a discovery?
Apparently is a discovery. Yeah, I don't know.
You basically pipe shit into lolcat, and it makes all of the output of your command or whatever cool rainbow colors. You know the Linux DevTime logo? That's basically what it does.
I thought Amalith drew that for some bizarre reason.
He did, but first of all, he did it with lolcat and then redid it with slightly different colors.
Well, hang on a sec. I don't think you can't really claim that you've just done something by just piping it into something.
Well, no, he recreated it slightly better, I think. It's been a while. I'd have to ask him about it.
Oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Oh, every script is going to have this from now on.
How have you been around this long and not heard of lolcat?
Because I fucking do my job. I don't fucking fart about with fucking lolcat all day. I mean, I obviously am going to do that now.
Well, between lolcat and terminal text effects, you're pretty much sorted.
Have you ever demessaged into the lolcat? The psychedelic, oh yeah, baby, it just makes everything better. I was like, what's that about SDA unreadable? I don't care, I've seen rainbows, baby.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Automox. Are you prepared for whatever shitstorm may hit your desk during the workday? Automox has your back. Check out the brand new Autonomous IT podcast. Listen in as various IT experts discuss the latest Patch Tuesday releases, mitigation tips, and custom automations to help with CVE remediations. Make new work friends. Listen now to the Autonomous IT podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you tune into your podcasts. On to a bit of admin then. First of all, thank you everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed of either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And you even get some episodes early. And if you want to get in contact, you can email show@latenightlinux.com. All right, well, I had a bit of a weird situation recently. My wife went away, so I set up in the kitchen to do my editing. Now, my editing machine doesn't have Wi-Fi. Normally, it's just plugged into Ethernet, no problem. So I thought, I'm going to need to get network into this machine somehow. So I looked for my old USB Wi-Fi dongles, and one of them I think was like B and G, and one was BG and N, and non-supported 5 gigahertz. So I was like, right, fuck this. I thought about using my phone, but then I was like, I don't really want to do that. And then I remembered something which I'm sure you lot all know about, but someone out there might not know about this. If you've got a laptop that's connected to your Wi-Fi and it has an Ethernet port, it is trivial to share that Ethernet port with another device. You just go into Network Manager, edit connections, and then go to your wired connection, go to IPv4 settings, and then instead of automatic DHCP, you change it to shared to other computers. And then once you've saved that, plug in your Ethernet cable to the laptop, plug it into the desktop or the Raspberry Pi or whatever it is that needs network, and boom, you've got network. And so I did this with a ThinkPad, obviously. And so for a week, my Wi-Fi dongle was a ThinkPad.
As nature intended.
Yeah. Then my wife came back and I moved my desktop back to where I normally do my editing, plugged it into the Ethernet, and didn't need to use the ThinkPad anymore. But I actually did this when my router sort of half died. So it's an ISP modem/router/access point, and all of the Ethernet ports died on it. So what I had to do was put my ThinkPad next to it, connect via Wi-Fi, do this Ethernet sharing, plug that into the switch, which then went off to the access points. And it was hunky-dory until I got my new modem. And this was right around Christmas as well, so I knew I was going to be absolutely fucked. So it can come in very handy. Obviously, you can do all this with IP tables. I'm sure you'd know how to do that manually, Félim, but there's a very easy way to do it with a GUI.
That's actually quite cool because, yeah, I mean, that is the only way I would have known to do it. I didn't think you could do this at all, so that's quite cool. It's always nice to be able to, like, show somebody a nice way to do things, not just go, well, fire up your terminal there now. I've got to read this bash script to you that's 10 lines long.
Yeah, it's literally a few clicks in Network Manager. The only problem is you have to remember to turn it back off again because then you take your ThinkPad somewhere else, plug it into Ethernet. Why isn't it fucking working? Oh, yeah, because I shared the bloody Ethernet with that desktop. Félim, why a Viz?
Yeah, this is another of my if I did a documentation properly, and if I did network diagrams, and if I did now wiring looms, this is what I'd use to do them. I don't do this, but, you know, it's a very cool tool. It's a simple YAML config where you can describe cable layouts and connectors, and it's very pretty and very simple. And if you're doing any type of engineering or network diagram layout stuff or connector diagrams for people for like a rack or whatever, this is excellent and is exactly what you need. It's a nice simple text format and it can generate it using a Python script.
Yeah, I've used this a few times through a documentation site at work, which compiles, I think, Hugo or something like that, YAML into HTML, which you can then just host somewhere. And it's a really useful way of, as you say, describing a diagram in text form, which is easy to update later on and renders to an image. It's really useful.
You have documentation in the place that you work.
Well, I think some people would probably disagree with me there.
Diagrams and documentation is a bit of an unsolved problem still. It's nice that this is specific for what looks like circuits, but and there's popular things like Mermaid, but I haven't found a really good way of doing this. But it is really important because the best way to do images in documentation is to not have them, because they're a nightmare to update and they quickly go out of date when you do add them. So this is a great solution.
Yeah, having something text-based that will then render out to an image is just the perfect solution, isn't it?
Yeah, and version managed if you put it in, some version control system, yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. Graham, what on earth is Unsong UN Song?
Unsong, yeah. So this is a weird one. This isn't open source. It's a book. It was a book written as a web serial, I think they call it, where the author wrote a bit of it every couple of weeks and published a little bit online. And I read this a few years ago, and I have to say I really enjoyed it. It's a bit like a Neil Gaiman kind of, with a mix of sci-fi, fantasy, religion, and an awful lot of puns.
I like how the books are Book 1, Genesis, Book 2, Exodus, then skip all the boring shit, Book 3, Revelation.
Yeah. You either get the humour in the book or you don't, so I think a lot of people won't like it. But it was a real accomplishment, and you can read it for free. It's not an open source or Creative Commons license, but the book became very popular. It's quite a thing, and people shared their own kind of builds of what was the web serial. And really this discovery is that the book is finally now available to purchase, self-published, and it's available on Amazon. I'm not affiliated at all, but it's really worth it if you're into this kind of thing, or just read the online version. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's an HTML version that you can just click through, and it looks like an RSS feed as well.
Yeah, and it's been quite a long time since the author made notes on this, but the author's always been engaged with, if you read each chapter online in the HTML version, there's loads of comments of people kind of responding to the things that were being written about. I didn't read it as it was written, but it must have been fun to be part of that kind of creative process. And this is a weird find, I admit, but it's a great book.
Oh, I saw it was finished in 2017 then. This is pretty old.
Yeah, but it's only just created like a paperback version of this you can buy.
Oh, right.
And is this website run by the actual writer of the book?
Yes, it is. The unsongbook.com one is.
Okay.
And I think he was holding out for a publishing deal. I mean, the book was shared very freely and people talked about it. And of course, you can get it for free. But basically, he tried to kind of keep some control because he was trying to get a book deal. I mean, it sounds like that maybe didn't happen, but it's great that he's publishing it himself.
It's funny you mention that. So I recently bought a tech book on OpenSense that was done in exactly that type of way. It was through the Amazon, I think it was actually a third-party German printer that printed the book, but it was a print-on-demand sort of thing, and the quality of it's like really good. So it's kind of a nice way to get a book that you think that there's not a big pile of them sitting in a warehouse somewhere.
I recently got an EPC back, an EPC 901. Which I'd lent to extended family, and they stopped using it a long time ago. I actually talked about this in a Linux After Dark episode, which is coming next week, I think, as you listen to this. But with my various playing around with that, I've ended up with a couple of discoveries. The first one is Bunsen Labs. Now, this was kind of a spiritual successor to Crunchbang.
Oh my God.
There's also Crunchbang Plus, I think. But Bunsen Labs is the one that I've always used, and it is a great distro. It's basically Debian with OpenBox, super lightweight. They've got a 32-bit version, which was ideal for the EPC. And it was actually surprisingly useful on that ancient Atom with 1 gigabyte of RAM. And it's making me think when I get my X270 back, I might stick it on there,
The 901 came with Windows XP.
Well, yeah, or Linux.
Dear God, when was that from? What is it? Mid-2000s?
Yeah, about 2008, something like that.
Do you know, I think I remember seeing them at it wasn't even OggCamp at that point. It was still Lug Radio Live back then. Wow, that is messed up.
Yeah, it came with Xandros, my one.
Oh my God, yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah, it's the original netbook, basically. Well, one of the original netbooks, anyway. It was a slightly later one, the 901. And yeah, it was great at the time. I've got a lot of nostalgia for this device because it's what I learned about Linux on in the first place. Because I had my desktop that was for serious stuff, and then I had this that I just played around with and tried out loads of distros and whatnot.
That's cool.
But yeah, anyway, Bunsen Labs is absolutely a great lightweight distro, highly recommended. But also, spoiler for that episode, Chris recommended Batocera, or is it Batocera, which is a pretty lightweight retro gaming distro.
Did we not try that earlier, ages ago?
Oh, I'm sure we've tried this out. I'm sure we've talked about it before. But it's absolutely ideal on this little EPC if what you want to do is run Mega Drive and Game Gear games like I do. And there's various versions for Raspberry Pis and stuff, but they've got a 32-bit x86 version. And I couldn't work out how to install it. So I just DD'd it over the SSD and crossed my fingers and it worked. And plugged in an Xbox controller, I think, some sort of old Xbox controller, just picked that up straight away. And within minutes I was playing Sonic and Sonic 2 and Mortal Kombat and stuff. It's brilliant. Amalith from Linux Dev Time told me about this, and it's udm14.com. And what it is a version of Google without the AI bullshit results. I mean, you still got all the SEO spam, but it sort of tidies it up a little bit. And it turns out that you can add and UDM equals 14 to a Google search, but this just does the search for you. All this links to various information, including tenbulinks.org, which you can then add as a search engine to Firefox or Chrome or whatever. And so you can get this like older school Google without the bullshit.
I use Grubel.de now.
All right. Not start page anymore.
No, I gave up on them. They sort of jumped the shark into dodginess with that company that bought them. So Grubel.de is my favorite one now.
Interesting.
Don't at me if they've done something awful. I don't want to hear about it.
Well, there's also a link on this udm14.com to FrogFind, which works on really ancient hardware that doesn't support SSL and stuff. So it's a very handy site. So thank you, Amalith, for suggesting that. Put a link in the show notes. Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back next week when who knows what it'll be, probably news and stuff, but you never know. Until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Félim.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.